Hi, Allison. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm actually not even in Portugal right now. I'm in the States for the first time since moving to Portugal. So, after 2 years, we're back here as a family for the summer, visiting family and friends, and getting our fix on some things that we miss a little bit. But yeah, I'm missing Portugal already. It's
Wow.
really hot here.
I really want to dive in a little bit and ask you more about that because that's super. I think this is a super interesting topic about the reverse culture shock. But before we get into that, you guys, I want to introduce to you our next amazing speaker. As you heard, she is speaking at a lot of different events about expat life, living abroad. Her name is Allison Baxley, and she's the founder of Renovating Life. She also has a really, really cool blog. She lives in Portugal. And today our chat is about daily life in Portugal, as well as moving tips. So I know a lot of you do want to move to Portugal. Put me in the chat if you want to move to Portugal. And if you don't, this talk is still going to be important to you because we will talk a little bit about the moving process and relocation. So that actually is applicable to everybody. So let me tell you a little bit more about Allison. So she's a wife to her high school sweetheart, ooh la la, and mother of two young children. She's a former advertising creative director. That's super cool. And creator of Renovating Life, which is an amazing platform and blog, which will definitely help you guys out in anything moving overseas. And she and her family uprooted their comfy lives in Brooklyn in 2021 in order to start fresh in Cascais, Portugal. And after living the rat race, of course, in New York City for 11 years, they decided they want to slow down, enjoy more of what life and the world has to offer, and live life with more intention. And Allison, thanks so much for being here. Do you think, are you living a more slowed down life? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. And I see a lot of people saying me about Portugal. So that's good to see. Otherwise, my blog becomes meaningless if nobody wants to move to Portugal anymore. So I do think that we have slowed down. I will say the first year or so, it's especially the first 6 months, was pretty hectic, just getting settled in. And we rented a 3-bedroom house that had no furniture. So finding all the right pieces to, complete the house and feel, make it feel like home. Um, Getting health numbers and, different bureaucracies set up after we first got there. It'll take a little bit of a toll on you at first, but I think coming into our second year, we definitely felt like we had more free time. My husband and I both work from home, obviously, because we're working remotely. So having more free time and just the ability to schedule our time the way we want to and not be sort of beholden to anyone in particular. So it's definitely slower than it was in New York. I
Good.
can't say no to that. It's obviously true.
And tell us about Renovating Life.
So when we first decided to move to Portugal, I was working in advertising. I had been freelance for many years, and I had originally thought, maybe I would try to continue freelancing once we moved. And I had had a gig for a while, and the gig ended, I want to say like February of 2021, and we were planning our move for July. And I thought, I've had this idea to do this blog for a while about family travel and just more, it started as an idea more as a creative sort of passion project for me, and also to keep our family and friends updated with what we're doing and what's going on in our lives. And then it sort of turned into something that once I realized how much information I had to find and how hard it was to find that information, I thought, if I'm having trouble finding all of this information, I'm sure everyone else who's trying to move to Portugal is also having trouble finding the right information. And so it sort of turned into a passion project of a different kind, where I really just wanted to help other people who were in the same situation as me, just have it a little bit easier, just a
Yeah.
little bit. Every little bit of ease helps.
Well, that's the thing, and that's why this summit is so cool. And hearing from like an expert like you, because instead of Google searching for 5 hours, it's like, wow, you've done that. you've already
Yeah.
put in that hard work too for us to benefit. So I appreciate that. And what is this information that you would say is the hardest to find when people are planning their move abroad?
Um, I think it's a mix between going to different government websites where maybe the translation isn't so great or the information is super vague. So you have to get more specific information from people who have already gone through the process. So like for Portugal, as an example, um, you must demonstrate sufficient means of subsistence. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means you have to prove a certain amount of money that you have available to you or coming into, depending on which visa you're getting, per month. But finding that exact information for each exact visa can be harder than just going to that page on that government website. So there's a lot of Facebook groups out there that have some wonderful information. But again, what I was trying to help people do was not have to comb through Facebook posts and replies and multiple websites and multiple this and that, and just really just have an accumulation of information in one spot, which is hard to do as well. I won't say I've done an amazing job at getting all the information on there, but what I can say is that the information I have on my site is all reliable and accurate. And so it just helps to get as much information in one place as possible versus 30 open tabs and who knows where you're getting this information from. Karen on the Facebook group says
Right.
one thing and John says another, and then who do you believe?
Right. And then you live there. So like you can tell us the real life experience. So can you kind of go a little bit deeper with, okay, American in Portugal, what does life look like on the day-to-day as an American in Portugal? We've also had some other people before that had this
Yeah.
question about like the way that we're perceived. So, I mean, if you can kind of touch on all of that with like American in Portugal and what your day-to-day looks like.
Day to day, I mean, it looks similar to the way it looked before because I was working from home, for me at least, but my husband was working in an office and now he works from home. My kids go to a bilingual Portuguese school, which has helped them learn the language really quickly. And so they've been able to integrate with the Portuguese culture, even quicker than we have because of the language barrier. Um, yeah, it's very free in the way that, I can wake up in the morning and say, okay, what do I want to get done today? And choose, what my day looks like versus back in Brooklyn, everything was on a time crunch, a schedule, rushing around, got to get here for the pickup, got to get here for the drop off, got to get to work and finish this project. And then I have to get home and, dinner, bath, bed. And then literally it's like a hamster wheel and it just keeps going every day. Whereas in Portugal, everything feels more like an intentional choice.
Okay. Thank you so much for like talking about that. It is really true when you move abroad that it's a totally different culture. So this operation of go, go, go. And do you also agree that you don't have to plan so much in advance when you're there? I feel like here we have to make plans in America. We have to make plans for when we want to see our friends, like multiple weeks
Yeah.
in
Oh,
advance.
absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot more spontaneity, which I love.
Yes.
Especially one of my best friends lives, 10 minutes walk away from me and our kids are friends. So, I mean, it's very easy to just, send a message and say, hey, we're going to go swimming. You guys want to come over? And people have the time and the flexibility to say yes, because everybody's, whether they have things on their calendar or not, you just have more, I don't know, more freedom is what it feels like.
For sure. I totally agree. Thank you so much for answering that. And then, okay, talking about the bilingual Portuguese school, how has that experience been? And also, how old are your kids?
My daughter is 7. She'll turn 8 in the fall, and my son is 4. So my daughter started her first year at this school. She was going into the first grade, and my son has been in the nursery school there. And I love that they're at the same place too, because one of the reasons this is going to sound silly, but one of the reasons I chose to have kids about 3 to 4 years apart was because I wanted them to be close enough in age so that they could be at the same school at the same time. So it's not only convenient for me, but also they're both they see each other every day at school, and they're just closer, I think, because of that. But the school itself is wonderful. We love it. It's a great mix of like academic, but also sort of world schooling. And there's, they do gardening, and they learn about recycling and like really global citizen kind of subjects that are setting them up to understand the whole world and not just as it pertains to them. Even in my son's preschool class, they had a whole section on recycling where they made things out of recycled products and different, they made a solar system all out of recycled goods. And so like, just, I don't know, it's a really cool school. I like it a lot. It's very different from a basic, and I don't want to say basic, but traditional international school that is maybe run on the English system or something like that. It's much different than that. It's got a really good mix of topics that they cover.
Wow. And anybody want to move abroad with kids, put me in the chat just so we kind of know that you're out there. And I'm sure the cafeteria food, this is what I've heard, is that once you switch over to the European schools, I mean, the food quality, all of that is so healthy. They put vegetables in there. It's not like microwave dinners.
Yeah, one thing I loved when I chose this school was that they do focus on really nutritious, organic. A lot of the food they farm themselves at the school. So like there's a really big emphasis on that. And it's funny that you mentioned the cafeteria food, because especially with the expats that I know, because there's a lot of Portuguese people that go to this school as well. It's not full of expats, although it is very multicultural. A lot of the expats kids complain about the food. My kids will eat not at home. They'll eat only what they want at home, but at school they'll eat anything and everything, and pick and choose what they like, but they will try everything. But a lot of the expats kids complain because it's I don't know, different, too healthy, and they don't sort of dumb down the food to a kid level. They serve like real food, like real adult style nutritious meals. And so I think that's why maybe some of the kids have a harder time with that, but my kids will eat anything.
Yeah. So I love this little talk about, schooling. It seems like a lot of people have teenagers. Tammy has teenagers. Imran has a couple of kids. Tammy's asking, any bilingual schools for high school? Have any recommendations? If not, I will also drop your website and your email in there so people can have it.
So when it comes to the language, there's basically three types of schools that you can go for. You can go like full international school, where most likely they're going to be taught in English 99% of the time, and then they'll do a couple of Portuguese lessons each week, sort of like Portuguese as a second language. Or you can go public school, which is going to be taught all in Portuguese, and they're going to get English as a second language. So those are the two extremes. And then if you're lucky enough to live in an area or choose an area that has a school that is bilingual, there's not that many of them. So that was one of the things I was really looking for, is a pretty equal mix of the language. I can think of three off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are more. But ours is technically a private Portuguese school, but it's got a very international student body. So they do focus in the upper levels, everything's taught in English, and in the lower levels, everything's taught in Portuguese, with a lot of extracurricular type stuff being in English. So there's a really good mix all day long. The three schools I know, the one that my kids go to is called Os Aprendizes. Right next door, there's an international school called St. James. That's also bilingual. And in Setúbal, there is a school called St. Peter's, which I loved, but I didn't want to live in Setúbal. It's sort of, it's a different area than Cascais and Lisbon. It's across the bridge. St. Peter's is another international school that's bilingual. And then depending on which private school, there's also a lot of other Portuguese private schools, but depending on which public or private school you choose, they may have more of a mix or more support for English or Portuguese. I mean, that's just something you have to kind of feel out as you're doing your school search.
Very cool. Oh, this is so cool. What about another question? So let's go on a different area. How much, somebody asked in the chat, how much Portuguese do you really need to know upon moving there? Great question, Carla.
It's going to depend on where you move to, so which area you're in. If you're in the Lisbon area, most likely you can get away with not knowing any Portuguese. I mean, obviously you'd want to try to learn, because at least, a basic level, just because it will make your life a lot easier if you understand the language, even if you can't fully speak it or anything, but just being able to read a sign or things like that. I live in Cascais, which is very expat friendly, and not just Americans. I thought when I moved there, I thought, oh, it's going to be too many Americans around me. And while it is very expat friendly and it has a big expat community there, it's very diverse at the same time. So there's expats from all over the world there. So that was something that surprised me in a good way. But yeah, I mean, I can get away with not speaking Portuguese most days if I don't want to. Very, very rarely am I forced into a conversation where the person really does not speak any English, but I actually love those conversations because then it forces me to practice. It's very easy to get away with just speaking English if you're in the right areas. But if you're planning to move to a small town or a village or somewhere outside of the major metropolitan areas, then it's more likely you're going to encounter a lot more people who do not speak a lot of English,
Right.
older communities in particular. So just again, depends on where you end up.
How is your level? And also, like, when did you start learning? Did you start?
So we've been living there for 2 years. I started a few months before we moved, but then, life happens and the move is going on, and there's just a lot of planning and execution stuff that gets in the way. So I sort of put it off, thinking that once I'm there, I'll be so immersed that it'll just happen naturally. Like I'll just naturally pick it up every day. But as I've said, I live in Cascais and it's very English friendly. So you don't have to speak Portuguese if you don't want to most of the time, although everyone appreciates when you try.
Yeah.
Yeah, my level is, I would say, definitely still basic. I think I know more than I think I know, but I'm very rarely tested, if that makes sense.
Right. I get what you're saying. You can do all the basics, like order, supermarkets, maybe.
I can read a lot better than I can speak. And what ends up happening is I go into a conversation like I'm going to speak Portuguese, and then it gets a bit hard, and then I have to switch to English, or it just ends up being a little too hard to get something maybe bureaucratic done. And you're just like, oh my God, does someone speak English, please? But I always ask in Portuguese, follow English.
Okay, perfect. So Allison, I'm going to ask you one question, and then, as you know, hosting a 5-hour summit, I'm going to run to the ladies' room for like a minute, but I'm going to give you a really good question. So then,
really impressive, by the way, that you're just doing this straight through. A lot of mine was pre-recorded, thank goodness.
No, I normally am good. Like yesterday, didn't even have to use the ladies' room, but today it's a little bit hotter, drinking a lot of water. So I do have another question for you about, you did talk about planning. Can you kind of walk us through in a couple minutes, like what was the planning process like? Because I think that's where everybody kind of gets hung up. The research phase is all fun and exciting, and let's say it's easy because you're just on your computer. What about the actionable items that you have to do? I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah, so we decided in the summer of 2020, obviously the height of the pandemic, to move to Portugal. Not so much on a whim, but I will say the decision to move to Portugal took us about 5 minutes. We had already been planning to move abroad for a year for a job that my husband was going to do. And then when COVID happened and the world shut down, that opportunity disappeared, and we were stuck in Brooklyn thinking, okay, what do we do now? So eventually, a few months into lockdowns and curfews and all the things, we said, look, we still want to move abroad. We are just going to have to make this happen on our own. And had, a very quick conversation. What's our favorite place that we've ever been? Where would we want to live? And at the end of that short conversation, it was Portugal. And so then I had to backtrack and we had to figure out, okay, how do you move to Portugal? Is it possible? What are the options and how do you make it happen? At that point, we had done some initial research. So this again is probably May or June of 2020. We had done some initial research, decided that there was a visa option for us. We had originally thought maybe the golden visa, because that's when you do a quick Google search, that's a lot of the information that comes up for Portugal is all about the golden visa. It's harder to find information about things like the D7 visa, the new D8 digital nomad visa. So again, backtracking to figure out how we can make this work. And eventually realized that the D7 passive income visa was going to be what we could use. And then, excuse me, and then kind of let that all ruminate for, I don't know, 6 months, maybe, I think. Made the decision. We knew we wanted to let my daughter finish her kindergarten year and then we would move in the summer and not mid-school year. So we temporarily sort of or tentatively planned our move for the next summer, so July of 2021. So just backtracking for you really quick, made the decision to move to Portugal in summer of 2020 in the height of the pandemic after a job opportunity to move overseas fell through. Let that sort of just roll around in our heads for about 6 months while we did some very light internet research. And then January 1st, literally January 1st of 2021, I said, okay, I know it takes about 6 months to get this all going and make this happen. So January 1st, let's get going. I joined a couple of Facebook groups. I started like really heavy internet research. And then again in February when my gig ended, started the blog. And there's no better way to learn something than to try to teach someone else something. So it was really perfect actually, because then I could do all the research for myself, get it up on the blog, and then sort of trial and test certain things too. So, even when I got to Portugal, having to exchange my driver's license, I had written a blog about it, like, oh yeah, you just do this and this and this, like based on all of the research that I had done, which
Wow.
was true. But then when you go through the process, it doesn't always go according to plan. So
For sure.
yeah, it took about, I think, from the decision to move to the actual move was about 1 year for us. And real actionable timing, it takes about 6 months to kind of get all your ducks in a row. And a lot of that depends on where you're applying for your visa. So the turnaround time on those visa approvals varies widely depending on which office you're applying through, but also it takes a while. For us, it took something like, I think, 82 days to get our visas approved.
But it's not that bad if you think about it, because for example, if you want to get citizenship, my mom and I are going to get our Czech citizenship.
Nice.
It's taking like 1.5 or 2 years for that whole process to happen. So
Yeah,
it's really not that crazy long of a process. But
it's not that long of a process, but it is something if you have, like for us, we wanted to move in the summer after school ended and before school started in Portugal. So I made every assurance that I possibly could that our applications were on point, because I didn't have time to go through like a reapplication or an appeal process. Like we needed to get to Portugal. So yeah, it's not that much time, but you do need to figure out, based on which office you're applying through, what's the average turnaround time. Because if you have a very specific time that you need to move, you'll basically plan backwards from that date, to give yourself whether it's 82 days, sometimes it's 2 weeks, it really depends. But you just something to keep in mind when you're planning I don't know if people like Gantt charts. I can't stand Gantt charts, but people like a spreadsheet with like, okay, it's this week and then this week and then this week. If you like that, you need to figure out how many days it's taking.
Definitely. And we have some more questions. Somebody asked, in terms of your business, because you have an online business, they were asking, how do you have it set up? And I think they asked like, where do you pay taxes and all that kind of stuff? If you're comfortable sharing, but if not, maybe more basic.
I will say taxes are very complicated for us because of the way my husband gets paid, and partially because of the fact that I did not set up a company in the States before I left, which was for me a mistake. Again, something that I didn't have the information about beforehand. And if I had had the information, I would have planned a little bit better. So yeah, I think in general, if you have your own company in the States, I highly recommend you incorporate that company and get that done before you move, because for something like an LLC or an S Corp, if you're paying yourself in dividends, dividends are not taxed in Portugal at all. So if you're making income, like I make very, very little income on my blog, but what little income I make from affiliate sales and things like that, I'm subject to Portuguese tax because it's live income. But if I had set up an LLC or an S Corp and all the money filtered through that, and then I paid myself in dividends, the dividends would be untaxed.
Amazing.
So
I love that.
it's worth, I will say it's worth having a consultation with an international tax accountant. I use one who's very good with Portuguese and US and UK taxes. So he's got a very well-rounded view of everything, and he can tell you how to structure everything beforehand. Unfortunately, I didn't meet him until it was too late. And so now we're sort of backtracking to figure out the best way to get everything on the up and up. But yeah, I would highly recommend you find someone that you trust and that gives you good answers, and you let them help you get that squared away beforehand.
Amazing. And then final question, before we bring Lauren on, she also is an expert in moving abroad. She helps clients, and she's calling in from Latin America. But last question for you, Allison, is what's the one secret you want to leave people with in terms of like, as they're planning their move abroad in the next 12 months?
Things are going to happen that are going to be hard and discouraging, and they're going to make you double back or think twice about, if this is the right decision for you. But if you have any inclination whatsoever to move abroad, to study abroad, to spend time abroad, just do it, because it's amazing. I mean, no matter whatever hardships come your way. I know someone who was just recently denied her visa even after an appeal, and she was heartbroken, but she's like, okay, I'm just gonna have to figure out another way. I'm gonna have to wait and I'm gonna reapply. And I love that attitude, because sometimes it doesn't work out or sometimes things go wrong, but in the end, it's gonna be worth it. So just do it.
I love it. Thanks so much. And can you explain what your gift is? I've just dropped it in the chat for you guys. Allison ran a pretty big summit just specific on Portugal the other day. So can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so we had more than 45 speakers. I think there ended up being 47 total sessions over the course of 5 days. This was just recently in May. So a lot of people, if you're in the Portugal chat rooms and all of that, like probably people that several, and a few that are in the summit here this weekend as well. So I have all of those videos archived on my site. And there's a promo code. I think I sent you a promo code, right? A promo. You can get access to all of those videos for just $27. Amazing. Everything from healthcare to taxes to real estate, like all the good stuff.
That's a lot of information. It's great. And yeah, guys, I've just put the promo code in the chat. It's untold20, and then the link is there. Allison, thank you so much, you guys. Please help me thank Allison in the chat for being here, for taking time out of her Sunday. She's calling from the US because she's there visiting her family right now. And it was
my new baby niece is in there, so I'm ready to go snuggle.
Yes. Awesome. We'll have fun. And I hope to see you.
Thank you so much.
It's so good to meet you.